Today I'd like to speak to you about African women's voice and representation. And I'm going to start with a story. A few years ago, I attended the International HIV/AIDS Conference in Toronto. And it was just at the time when people had started talking about the feminization of HIV/AIDS, about how women were being more infected than men, about how the issues of care and treatment were impacting on young girls and women far more than other groups, and about how African women in particular were having to deal with the impact of the pandemic. And in that context, we went to this conference, and everybody was talking about African women and HIV/AIDS. So we came to the opening ceremony, and there weren't any African women that were on that platform. And then we had the opening plenary, and there were no African women on that platform. And then they had the opening press conference, and there were no African women on that platform. You get my drift. And we were amazed. I was stunned that at this conference, where important discussions were held, where critical decisions were reached, people could stand there and feel all right about talking about African women, but not having African women there to represent themselves and bring their voices to the discussion. And when the conference organizers were challenged about this, because there were quite a few of us that were concerned about this, they turned around and said, well, we invited President Johnson Sirleaf, but she couldn't make it. And it was like adding fuel to a fire, actually, because President Sirleaf had been elected and was leading a country coming out of years of conflict. It was an incredible job ahead of her to do. And to say that you invited one African woman, and because she couldn't make it, you couldn't invite anybody else. And we were sitting there in that room, and I could identify at that conference as participants, but not as people at the plenary, dozens of intelligent, articulate, passionate, experienced African women who were HIV/AIDS activists. And the issue is that it wasn't just about that one conference. This happens over and over and over again. And when we talk about getting the big picture, how are we ever going to truly get the big picture if we exclude so many of the people who already experience the issues that we want to deal with? How are we going to get a big picture if the voices of African women are not part of the discussion, are not part of the decision making? And the response from that conference of saying we asked this one African woman who couldn't make it actually is something that happens over and over again. The world seems to operate on this very mistaken myth that there are only 6 African women leaders on the continent, because it's always the same women who are invited. And please don't get me wrong, I love those women. Those women have carried a massive burden for other African women. They have had great achievements. They have been mothers and mentors to so many of us who have a very long way to go before we can illustrate the kind of work that they have done, before we can emulate the kind of work they've done. But it's wrong and it's unfair to only ask a few African women to be the voices of millions of African women on the continent. And those very leaders that are on that short list are the first who'd come out and say, we cannot represent all African women on all subjects. It's unfair to those African women on that short list because people set them up to fail when they ask them to speak outside of their areas of specialism and passion. It's unfair to the thousands of other African women leaders who never get their expertise acknowledged, who never get their voices given value. And it's unfair to the millions of people in this world, not just on the African continent, but internationally, whose lives could be changed for the better if we actually harnessed the voices, the ideas, the innovation of African women. And I ask myself sometimes why this happens. Why is it that people don't ask enough African women, don't ask the variety of African women for their input? And partly I think it's laziness. It's very easy for people to sit there and say, oh yeah, let me ask from this list of 6 that we all know about. But the other side of it, I think, is that the world continues to portray African women as victims. They talk about African women and it's always as victims of one problem or another: poverty, sexual violence, HIV/AIDS, whatever you want to look at. And when people portray us as victims, they don't want to ask us about solutions, because people don't ask victims for solutions. And so it's a real issue that we need to take very seriously, that we need to get African women's voices out there. We need to get the representation in the places of power. And the good thing is that that small list is growing. We've got the really wonderful Lima Gbawi, who's now being asked to take her place and be part of all kinds of discussions. And that's great, because Lima is such a wonderful woman with so many great ideas. But the issue for Africa is that if we have to wait for every African woman who has ideas to be given a Nobel Peace Prize before they're given a place at the table, we will be waiting a very, very long time. So, what I want to do is go beyond the rhetoric. And I just want to give you a few examples of women who've done amazing things and who I think you should know about and should be listening to. There are lots of them. It was really hard coming down to just a few. This is Felicia Darkwa. 14 years ago, Felicia's daughter died giving birth. Her daughter was an amazing woman. She was an economist, she was passionate, she was vibrant, she was ready to change the world. And she died giving birth in circumstances that could and should have been avoided. Now, Felicia didn't just lie back and take it. Despite being devastated, she took that experience and she set up an organization called the Nanaya Memorial Trust in remembrance of her daughter. And she has been working tirelessly on issues of maternal health ever since. She's helped put together all kinds of tools, from looking at maternal health checklists, through getting out information about family planning and how you space your babies so that women have a better chance of survival and so their children have a better chance of survival. She has worked tirelessly and she has saved countless lives in Ghana, which is where she works. But she's also gone beyond that. She's actually influenced the Ghana Medical Service so that they think differently about the way they work with pregnant women. And now the tools that they've developed are being used in neighboring African countries. And my question is, where is Felicia's voice? Where is her experience in a time when we are all talking about maternal health, maternal mortality, and the need to change that, particularly in Africa, where the statistics are so appalling? We need the voices of Felicia and thousands like her at those decision tables to make that change. And this is Giselle Yitamben. Giselle is a wonderful, wonderful woman, really funny, very charming, very articulate. But the amazing thing about Giselle is that her ideas about how you pull women out of poverty and help them actually build wealth are ideas that she's put into practice. She used to go into her village in the Cameroon and saw that every harvest, women would gather lots and lots of fruit. And during the harvest season, because the fruit was so prevalent, they couldn't get a good price for them. They'd get a pittance for their crop. And then in a few weeks, the harvest would be over and there would be no fruit at all. And then there'd be a real shortage, and even the women themselves would have to pay exorbitant prices just to try and get fruit to the tables. And she decided to use this experience to change the economic security of those women. So she went out and she found some technicians to come into the village and teach the women how to build very simple equipment to use the sun to dry the produce when it was abundant. So then they had dried fruit. And then she went a step beyond that and went out and found a market for the dried fruit, including external buyers, so that in fact the demand for the fruit that the women produced was so great that Giselle and her organization went out to villages that were surrounding them and had to teach a lot more women how to make the equipment, how to dry the fruit, so that they could together meet the demand for the produce. Giselle changed the lives of those women. She pulled them out of poverty, and she went far beyond the panacea that we sometimes talk about in terms of microcredit. She went into economic security in a large scale, and those women not only were pulled out of poverty, but they were helped to grow their wealth. They changed their lives, the lives of their children, and the lives of their community. And Giselle has hundreds more ideas like that. Giselle is one of the people we should be listening to. Where is she? And this is Ida Mukaka. You can see from that picture what kind of a person she is. She's just fantastic, and she's at her best when she's working in grassroots communities. She's warm, she's funny, she's dynamic. And Ida came out of some of the worst violence that you don't even want to imagine. And when she found that she was HIV positive, she didn't hide away. She took that experience and went out into communities in Zambia and used her experience to help other women and other men learn how to live with HIV/AIDS. She took her experience and helped NGOs learn how to build from the grassroots so that villages would know the best ways of fighting the HIV/AIDS pandemic. She used her experience and knowledge and now works with the Stephen Lewis Foundation and takes that experience to other countries in East and Southern Africa. And she's moved beyond that because she mentors young women. She helps deal and look after and build the confidence and the life chances of children orphaned by HIV/AIDS. And she does that in Zambia, she does it in other parts of Africa, and now she's beginning to do it internationally. Ida is a treasure trove of ideas. Her voice needs to be heard because when we listen to voices like Ida's, we have a real chance of changing the world. And then finally, Bisi Adeleye Fayemi, Joanna Foster, and Hilda Tadria. These are the three women who founded the African Women's Development Fund, which is the organization that I work for. And these three women had been working separately on social justice issues for a very long time. And the conclusion they came to was that if we really want to accelerate change, if we really want to unleash the power of women, then we need to get more resources to women's organizations to actually help them to do what they do better. And so they established AWDF, which was the first Pan-African women's rights grant-making organization. And when they started, there were a lot of people who were very skeptical. People who were saying, oh, well, you know women can't work together. People who were saying, well, how long can that organization last? People who were saying, what kind of money are they going to be able to get into the field? Well, 11 years down the road, AWDF has made over $19 million in grants to 800 organizations in 42 African countries. These three women have changed the lives of millions of other women, and they have more ideas. Their voices need to be heard. We need to bring them into the discussions where decisions are made and the lives of African women are affected. For each of the women that I've spoken about, there are thousands more. Women who've got even more amazing stories behind them, women who have achieved as much, if not more. Now, just as I can't speak for all African women, neither can any of these thousands of women. And some of those women have fantastic ideas. Some of them have positions that I absolutely endorse. Some of them have positions that I don't like at all. But the point is that it is a diversity of voices. And the more African women's voices we have in critical places, the better we will be able to challenge the wrongs and the injustices, the more we will be able to push for the change that we really want to see. If we really want the big picture, if we really want to change the world, we need to bring African women to the center of the picture and not marginalize them. Together we can do that. Thank you.
There you go. See? They wouldn't let me talk, they wanted to clap you instead. Thank you for bringing those beautiful, powerful faces to this stage. The issue you're talking about is not just an issue for African women. It's speaking as a conference organizer, it's an issue we face generally. You know, in the 10 years I've been running TED, we've taken the percentage of women from about 10% of the speakers up to about 25%, but it's still not enough. For those 25%, our team probably puts in twice the level of research per speaker than for the men. And so there's you know, different people have different theories as to what's happening, but I mean, it seems like men are just less good at editing themselves. They put themselves forward. Women sometimes have an excuse, maybe not this year, maybe I'll be a bit better positioned next year. And I mean, I would say to the women out there, TED, other conference organizers out there are actually dying to hear your voices. And you're right to hold, you know, we have to be less lazy. But women, put yourself forward. You know, the world actually needs to hear your idea, your thinking, even if you're not 100% confident about it, even if you're only 99% confident, you know, let us know. And together maybe we can try and fix this problem.
Absolutely. And ask us. There are women's organizations the world over who have lists of names, and we would be really happy working to get some of those names to you, working with women to make them feel confident enough and wanted enough to come and speak.
Well, we're going to be in touch with you afterwards, I can assure you. Thank you so much.
My team will do that.
Thank you.